Hi, welcome to the Business Growth Journey podcast with me, Nick Termini. Today, got an incredible guest, my man Quinton Lewis. Quinton, what's up, man?
Not much, Nick. I'm happy to be here. What's going on with you?
Nothing, man. I'm excited to have you on the show and welcome.
Looking
So,
forward.
Quinton, but before we get rocking and rolling here, how do we know each other?
Well, I think I was on your very first podcast. I got onto Action Coach really early. I think we've known each other for 3 or 4 years now.
Yep,
Some of your networking stuff, we've hung out. Yeah. So we've known each other for a few years now. And, I'd love to see your progression and our progression too.
absolutely. Well, cool. Well, thanks for being on the show. I'm excited to have you on to talk through your journey. So, Quinton, first to get started, let's get to know you a little. Tell us about where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah. So I grew up in Lone Jack, Missouri.
Yep.
Any of your listeners might know Lone Jack because they might got a speeding ticket there, heading down to the lake or something. That's kind of what we're known for. Small school. I think I graduated with like 46 people in my class or so. And then once I graduated there, I headed out to UCM, Central Missouri, and started on an aviation degree. So I was in the aviation department down there. And in 2018, I graduated from UCM with a flight operations management degree and, some business minor degrees as well. And I was working actually at Sherwin-Williams in
Nice.
Warrensburg. And I was going to go do my master's in aviation safety. And I don't know, I hated my life. I was done with school and I really didn't like working for, full time for a retail company. And so I decided that wasn't for me. I had some friends who were working for an aerial survey company that was based out of Olathe, Kansas at the Johnson County Executive Airport. And I thought, hey, man, that sounds pretty cool. I just want to get in an airplane, get some real world experience. Maybe I'll come back to school at a different time. And so I went off there, and for about 3 years we hit the road. I was all over the country. I think we did work in 31 states in 1 year. I think that was my first year there, and I spent 100 days in a hotel room. So
What?
I got to see a lot of really cool parts of the country. Small towns, big cities, a little bit of everything. And then that company left Kansas City, left Olathe in 2021, and they laid us off at the same time. Gave us an opportunity to move to a different location up in Philadelphia to continue doing some of the similar work that I'd been doing before. And it really didn't make sense for me and what I wanted to do with my career. My business partner and I, who also worked at the company, we filed for an LLC to start our company in July of 2021, and it's kind of been history ever since.
That's awesome. All right. So there's the high level version. Now let's get into it a little bit. So when you were in high school at Lone Jack, the town known for giving out tickets for lake visitors, right? What type of stuff did you do? Were you in any activities, sports, anything like that?
Yeah, I played sports, both football and baseball. I think I really got a lot of my leadership skills, through not only high school sports, but just sports growing up. But, I think
Yeah.
I learned a lot of those things and how to work on a team and how to work with different personalities. Outside of that, I had a bunch of, smaller odd jobs. I would umpire baseball and softball games, would,
Wait, what'd you think of that? Being an umpire, like I was a basketball referee for 1 year when I was in high school, and you get to see the other side of
yeah.
parents when you're the referee. Like, it's crazy. What
Yeah.
what were some of the experiences you had?
I had a really good time doing it. In such a small town, I knew most of the parents, or at least the kids that were on
Yeah.
the field. So I knew most of the parents that were standing behind me, and never really got too much gruff from them. But I certainly saw some things, while I was there. But it was a really good time. So and I love baseball and just
Yeah.
around it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I did that, and I worked basketball tournaments on the weekends. I remember my high school paid me 1 year to take care of the baseball field. My senior year,
What?
we didn't have enough classes. And so during the day, I would go up and take care of the baseball field. So I was always trying to make a little bit of money so I could, put some gas in my tank and go get into trouble with my friends.
So wait, were you dragging the field? Like, did they give you access to, like, the tractor and all
We
that kinda stuff? Like, what were did you weed eat too?
No, they'd have a mower. I would go in and they had this three-wheeler that I would drag the field with. And so I'd go up there and I would chalk the field so it'd be nice and perfect for game time, and I'd already be dirty by the time I got up there for the game.
That's good stuff. Okay, so did you ever work on like, are you a mechanically inclined person? Like, are you good at fixing things?
Yeah, so, especially with my education, being in aviation, we had a lot of systems classes, and so I understand, the basics about most of that stuff, and then just being in aviation for the past, well, 8 years now, I know a little bit about it, those type of engines and those type of parts, but outside of that, maybe not so good.
Okay, cool. So after high school, what was next? You mentioned going to UCM.
Yeah, I went to
What
UCM.
led you there? Why'd you go there?
So I had a couple flights with a flight instructor that was a friend of the family, and
Wait, you're already flying planes at this point?
yeah, my senior year of high school, I got to do just a few flights with a local instructor who's based out of Lee Summit.
Okay.
Just wanted to make sure that I really liked it because aviation was something that I thought was really cool, but my family wasn't really into aviation, and I didn't really know anybody into aviation, so it was something totally new. And then I ended up at UCM because they have, one of the larger aviation programs in the state. It's 25, 30 minutes down the road. It's fairly cheap compared to some of the other options that are further away. And so it just made sense. Both of my parents went to UCM, my uncles and grandparents, and yeah, so it was kind of a legacy thing too, I guess.
Okay, so there's a gap in the story here. When did you just gravitate to aviation? Like, how did that come?
I don't know. I think I just wanted to do something fun.
You
You know,
just love watching birds, so you're like, "Hey, let's
yeah.
let's get up in the air." Like, how'd it come together?
Well, I have a little bit of ADHD,
Who
so
doesn't?
sitting at a desk just didn't necessarily, make sense to me. Coincidentally, I'm sitting at my desk right now that I sit at, most days, every day. Yeah, it was just something a little bit different that I wanted to go do. There was a school right down the road. I think at the time, I wanted to go into the military, and so I was really looking at, pursuing a career in the Air Force and potentially flying for the Air Force. That didn't work out. That's not really where I wanted to take my career path. And so yeah, spent 4 years down at UCM, and I worked at Sherwin Williams because I did have another paint job back in high school during the summers, and so I had a little experience there. And so worked part time and then went to school full time for 4 years.
At what point did you get your pilot's license to be able to fly?
My pilot's license was my freshman year of college, so I think I was 18, I guess, at the time. You only need about 40 hours to get your private pilot's license, so it's fairly cheap compared to the other ratings. You get up there, you can fly plane around yourself, and it was a cool experience. The crazy part is I'm afraid of heights, which like I know a lot. I know a lot of
I
pilots.
did not see that coming.
Yeah, I know a lot of pilots that are kind of afraid of heights, and it's more like, I can't stand on top of a 30-foot ladder and like, pull gunk out of a gutter. But in the airplane, it's a little bit different. It's about control. And so, yeah,
For 30,000 feet, not 30?
pretty much. Yeah.
Alright. Uh, yeah, that just blew my mind. So, what was it like the first couple times getting up in the plane, like, going through to get your certification, but then also when you went out by yourself the first time?
Yeah, the first couple times it was actually in high school. It is pretty nerve-wracking. My flight instructor was an older gentleman. His name was Phil LePage. I think he was about 82 years old when I first started taking instruction from him. And about 30 minutes into the first flight, he let go of the controls as we were on a final approach into the airport. He said, "Okay, this landing's yours." I said, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, this landing's yours." And so, I struggled. We got down, we landed, we were safe. And, I kind of asked him why he did that later. And he said, He's like, look, I'm 82. We have no idea when or if I could, essentially croak up in the airplane. So you need to be able to learn how to land that's the first thing you need to know how to do. And so, we did landing practice for the rest of that time. Fortunately, Mr. LePage, did pass a few years back, but he was kind of a legend out at Lee Summit, and yeah, I'm sure a lot of people.
Yeah, let's go ahead and analyze the legend of Phil LePage because as you're saying that, think of, you've got the fear of someone that's brand new and up in an airplane and whatever runs through your brain in that scenario. Imagine being the person that's sitting next to the freaked out kid that's learning, right? Like, at what point did he develop a comfort level with that? Like, is it just, I know I'm going to take over if I need to, or how does that work? Because I think getting your license is one thing where it's like kind of nerve wracking, but being the trainer, whoa.
Yeah. That's probably the worst job in aviation, I think. Yeah. At least one of the worst jobs in aviation, but it's also probably the most common job in aviation beyond the airlines or
Yeah,
cargo, I guess. Almost every airline pilot that you know of either came from the military or they
yeah.
came from being a flight instructor. And so, yeah, I have lots of friends that were flight instructors. I have friends that are still flight instructors. The it takes a lot of gall to get into an airplane with sometimes as low as a 15-year-old kid who has no idea what they're doing.
So they can't drive a car, but they can fly a plane.
Yeah, yeah, you put your life into their hands, and yeah, it's pretty sketchy sometimes, but Mr. LePage had been doing it for so long, and I think that he had this comfort that he was okay with everything that he was seeing, and most of the flight instructors that I know are pretty quick to correct if you're doing anything wrong because they don't want to die.
Yeah, I get that. I can imagine sitting sharing some stories with Mr. LePage. I can imagine he's got some pretty good ones.
Yeah, he had some pretty good ones. I knew a couple other people, and I've met a bunch of other people that have come across his path and know him pretty well. And I remember on that first flight, I got out of the plane and my legs were like shaking because it was just so exhausting. And it was a really short flight, but you have the rudder pedals down on the ground, and you're trying to figure those out, and you're just completely tense the whole time. And so you just get out and like ready for a nap, and yeah, it was a lot of fun, but definitely an exhausting experience.
Holy cow. That's insane. So after you got your pilot's license and kind of got your sea legs or air legs for better lack of terms or lack of better terms, is that when you were hooked and knew that was a path you wanted to go in college, or how did that come together?
So I got my private in college. That you get to do a couple solo flights before you get your private, and so I got to go up and fly around on my own for a little bit, and that's nerve wracking in its own way, especially being close to white men. There's lots of military traffic and stuff out there in that area. Yeah, I think after getting my private, I think I was actually a little wishy-washy on exactly what I wanted to do. Most pilots get into aviation to go into the airlines or go into the military. I was still pursuing the military option at that point. I was in Air Force ROTC. Wasn't exactly enjoying my time doing it, and I think that's really what led to me dropping out of that program. But yeah, I think after that happened, I loved aviation, I guess, was a thing, but I just wasn't really sure about what I wanted to do with my career. And I think sometimes people don't realize that even like the funnest jobs can become monotonous and like kind of boring. And I've always heard that airline pilots are essentially just glorified bus drivers. From route to route, a lot of times the same route over and over and over and over again. And a lot of the airline pilots that I know don't necessarily see it as a hobby anymore or see it as a passion. They just kind of see it as a job, albeit a very well paying job in a lot of cases.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a job is still a job at the end of the day, right?
Sure.
Okay, and so now you're at UCM and you're starting to see your path come together and you realize you don't are not gonna join the military. How did you kind of, look at what was next?
So, I was looking into a master's degree in aviation safety. I think with the idea that it would help me find more of um, a more administrative role within aviation, or at least give me more tools to go and do some stuff outside of actually flying the plane. So at one point, I had looked at being an aviation lawyer. I'd looked at pursuing a career with the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Bureau. To look at aircraft accidents and things along those lines. And so I really just wanted to give myself a little bit more time and a little bit more experience in aviation, and kind of that elevated degree to go and do some things. But like I said, I really just was kind of fed up with school and then working full time, and I wanted something different, and anything in aviation I was really happy with. And a few of the guys that I had hung out with during college, they were a couple years older than me. They had gone to work for this company in Johnson County, executive in Olathe, and they called me out, and I was a sensor operator for them. So I was not a commercial pilot. I did not get to do some flying, and I got to help out a lot with the flying, and I gained a lot of experience there. But I was not necessarily the pilot in charge during those flights.
So as you were going, like, curiosity is what keeps ringing through my head as you're talking about how you navigated all the different possible opportunities in aviation. Did you have a mentor, or would you just talk to a lot of different people to kind of get a clearer picture of what each opportunity could look like? Or how are you coming to conclusions as you were going through so many different avenues in aviation?
Yeah, I had a lot of mentors. There's a lot of business owners in my family, and the close family friends. Some of my old coaches, like a lot of them really just instilled, like find what you're good at, and then just pursue that. I was an okay pilot. I wasn't a great pilot by any means. I think I was better with people, especially the types of people that want to be a pilot. And so I think I just kind of started seeing that I'd rather deal with the people a little bit more than I wanted to fly the airplanes, because again, the airplane flying to me can be a little boring at times, and I wanted to go out, and I still wanted to be in aviation, but I just wanted to find something just a little bit more exciting, and something that I could work with people on.
So and then you fast forward to your first gig, and you said Olathe. What did that look like? So you said working with sensors.
Yeah.
What were you Did you kinda have a path that you saw into eventually owning your own company, or it was just basically you're taking a job to learn more in the aviation space, and then things just started to get clearer and clearer?
Yeah, so at the time when I first started, I still wanted to be a pilot, or at least earn my commercial rating. I was still working towards that. And the idea was that I could work for this company and save up some money. I was around aviation getting experience, and then I could finish
Yeah.
up my ratings, that way. And on the non-pilot side, I rose through the ranks pretty quickly. We had a pretty big operation. I think at one point we had like 7 aircraft and maybe 8 or 9 of these sensors. So these are either lidar sensors or imagery cameras, big camera sensors, 1.5 million, couple $1 million a piece. They're pretty crazy. And so we had a pretty big fleet and a pretty big equipment list, and I think 7 or 8 different crews. So with a pilot and an operator, so maybe up to 15, 16 people. And I was in charge of half of it. I was in charge of the operator side, and then the sensors. And I was just really enjoying it. And I thought I was good at it. Never really thought at the time that that was something that I would want to do in the future, or even that there was an opportunity that I could start my own company. But then once that started to fizzle out in 2021, or I guess late 2020, early 2021, whenever they laid us off, uh, I had a good friend that was working with me, and we had a discussion about the potential to be our own boss someday, and to have a little bit more freedom. And I think part of that was we saw a lot of the inefficiencies that we had in our company that we had previously worked for. And a lot of that was because they had gone through a recent merger, a nationwide merger, huge amounts of money. They had bought a bunch of new equipment. They had pulled a bunch of small businesses together that all kind of worked independently and separately and had their own different cultures and operational styles and all these things. And so there was just a lot of inefficiencies. And to tell you the truth, we wasted a lot of money. Airplanes are very expensive to operate, and there were just times where we would have a little bit too much leeway to fly the planes. If something was wrong with the sensor, we turn a bolt, quarter turn, and let's go up and let's try to fly it again. Let's see if that'll work. And so me and my now business partner, when we were working there, our jobs. So I was in charge of the cameras and the sensors and the operators that ran them.
And could you talk real quick about what the sensors and cameras are used for?
So both
Just high level.
both imagery and LiDAR data is used for survey in particular. So we do aerial survey. And so that's used for large engineering projects, pipelines and utilities. Insurance companies sometimes use our data. Counties and cities and even states a lot of times use this type of data. My favorite one to tell everybody, because it's kind of controversial for one of the uses. When we worked for our old company in 2000, I guess this would have been like early 2020 or maybe 2019. We collected imagery and LiDAR of all of Jackson County, Missouri, every square inch of it. We did it in 9 days with like 7 different airplanes, and we just went, balls to the wall and got it done. That data was most likely used later to raise everybody's property taxes in Jackson County, using aerial data. So the county can take that data and they'll use different softwares to pull different data sets and information out of it. If you have an unpermitted shed in your backyard, but you're completely surrounded by trees, it doesn't matter. They're going to find you with some aerial imagery, so they'll know what you're doing.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah. So my business partner, he ran the aviation side of things, and yeah, we just saw a lot of the inefficiencies that were going on in this business, and that was part of the reason that led to our company pulling their assets out of Kansas City and laying us off.
Mhm.
And so we thought, hey, let's just try to give this a go, and let's try to run this how we would run it if it was our own company. And then so in July of 2021, we did some research. We filed an LLC, and then I started looking around for sensors. I'd actually looked around for sensors before this, but our idea was that, hey, let's go out and let's try to find a way to buy one of these cameras or one of these LiDAR sensors.
So where do you find a sensor camera? Just like Facebook Marketplace?
Well, there's some big companies, a lot that you might have heard of on the imagery side, especially Leica had made a lot of large format cameras. Leica's a large manufacturer of all types of cameras and glass for lenses and whatnot. Phase One is another imagery company. Vexel is another imagery company, and they actually bought the company that I worked for. They purchased that company, and so I was a Vexel employee towards the end. On the LiDAR side, there's two main manufacturers in the US for large format, something that you would put in the bottom of an airplane. But there's a few others that make smaller LiDAR packages that you can put on a drone, or sometimes you see them like on top of a car. The Waymo, if you've ever taken one of those driverless Waymos, those use LiDAR and radar and different types of technologies to do what they do as well. So it's pretty cool stuff.
So do you have any connection to the Waymos?
No, I've ridden in one once. It was fun.
They're funky, man.
Yeah, they are. It's cool.
That is cool. Okay, so it sounds like we're starting to hear how Helios Airborne Solutions is coming to life. So was it from this point that you and your partner decided to launch your company, or where are we at in this phase of your career?
Yeah, so we decided to launch our company. We found out very quickly that buying a sensor was probably not in the cards for us.
Yeah.
We thought we could potentially find a loan to go out and buy one of these sensors and then start doing the work. The problem there being that it's near impossible to do that, especially without any existing collateral. We went to the companies that manufacture them and asked them, hey, do you guys have some type of lease to buy program, or some lenders that could potentially work with us? And they really didn't. And their pricing structure was you paid 10% a down payment, and then 30 days later you pay the other 90%. And so we were going to have to come up with, $1.5 million in 30 days, maybe on the low end of some of those sensors if they were a little bit older, seven, $800,000. And it just didn't happen. So we decided to focus on the aviation side of things, which actually turned out to be better because both of us have aviation backgrounds. My business partner is, a pilot, a commercial pilot, and has a lot of time in flying aerial survey now. So I was looking around for sensors or aircraft, mostly aircraft at this time, and I found a website online that was a broker for aerial survey equipment. So I gave them a call, and I was talking to them, and they were great. They were talking me through a lot of things, and they probably didn't realize how really inexperienced I was outside of the operational side of things. And the gentleman said, "Hey, you're going to be at Maps next week, right?" I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna be at Maps next week." Like, literally in the middle of the phone call, I'm talking to him. I'm like Google searching on my computer, like, what is Maps? And so I'm like trying to figure it out. And like I think the next week after that, they were having an event in Asheville, North Carolina. It was a conference. I decided right there. I said, "Hey, I'm going to, I'm going to go to that event. Like, I guess I have to be at that event." So at the time, we didn't have a plane, we didn't have a camera sensor, we had nothing. We might not have even actually had an LLC at this time. It might have come like either right before or right after. But I decided to go and to do some networking, and then really with the focus of we're trying to figure out what the rest of the industry wants. We know what our former employer wants. They're still active in certain areas. But we want to get a taste of what the rest of the industry was like because we never really had that chance with our former employer. And so, I went to that event. I actually saw my former boss there. That was a fun experience. Kind of awkward, but it went well. And so we started out there and got a few opportunities. We found a plane that we leased full time throughout 2021, or actually I guess 2022. And then we found a partner who owned a sensor that was willing to let us use it and to do some of their work, and then to do some outside work as well. And so we found a partner for on both sides, and we had a ragtag operation going that year, but it was a good learning experience. We made some mistakes, and it's definitely helped us get to the point where we're at now.
Okay, Quentin, this is fun stuff. So you're talking about a ragtag group. I mean, it's in the beginning of starting a company, it's about being scrappy, right? Like make shit happen, get out, put yourself out there, make connections, build relationships, you know, first develop some kind of understanding of what you don't know, then learn how you're going to learn it and understand it, and then like build from there. So, I'm just picturing you like going like, oh, this maps event. Oh, okay, cool. And like looking it up and then going, and then like, did you have the moment where you're like on the airplane flying there and like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what was going through your head, and how did you continue to push forward? And like, if you were able to find a plane, a sensor, a partner in this, like the action you took is like where like the tremendous growth and learning began, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of just F it. I mean,
Yeah.
there's like we gotta go do it. It was kind of low risk at the time. We didn't really have a ton of money that was sunken into this business venture. We didn't have a loan. We didn't really have any overhead. I said let's just go see what can happen. You said you don't know what you don't know, and like that's kind of what you're trying to learn. And I knew that I didn't know most of it, but I knew like the people. Again, it comes back to the people. And so if I can go to Asheville, I know that I can get the people to help me, or like to help me figure it out what the rest of it is like. And and to learn some of these lessons that they've learned, and try to learn from them. And yeah, so I was good enough at doing that to where, I started building a lot of connections there. I'm still active with that group 5, 6 years later. I'm way more engaged. I serve on, I lead one of their committees, and I host a panel at each conference now, and doing stuff with them on Capitol Hill and their federal conference. That's been a really great source of education and information for me, and extremely vital in the progress that our company's made.
You know what's cool is a lot of people would make up reasons why not to go. Like we don't have a company yet. We don't have a plane. We don't have a sensor. Like and create their own obstacles and box themselves in. Where I love the mindset, man. Like I'm gonna go. We're gonna make some relationships, make some friends, and who knows what comes out of it. But what we do know is if we don't go, we won't gain anything new.
Yeah.
Dude, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think, maybe not every industry, but this industry in particular that we're in, the geospatial, the GIS aerial survey industry, this sales side of things, we look at like what makes a good salesman. And in my opinion, there's really two different routes in our industry. You either go with the tech guy, the guy who knows exactly what the data looks like, all the different applications for it, the softwares, even the hardware and stuff that we were collecting it with, the true engineers and the tech people in our industry. And then you go to the salespeople, and I remember talking about this a lot, especially amongst this association, this group that I'm talking about. What makes the best salesperson? Do you take a guy who does sales and teach them the tech side of it, or do you take the tech guy out of the lab, and then do you teach him how to do sales? And I think both can be successful, but I think what really makes sense to me is go get the guy who can just make friends and go and hang out and build a network, with some of these people that in these industries. And um, a lot of the connections that I made at that first event really never paid off for me, or didn't pay off for me until several years down the line. So it's really just about, you got to get through the door, and you got to start making those connections wherever you are, because a lot of times these people aren't necessarily looking for your technical expertise. They're looking for somebody that they trust, for somebody that you can have great conversations with. And because when you get into these sales atmospheres that these conferences have, when everybody's just trying to sell and everybody's trying to make a partner and work together, it just gets so cloudy. And so a lot of times you really have to really find those opportunities. Sometimes it's like 2:30 a.m. in the morning, and you're probably way up later than you should be, and you got to be up early for some panel or something. It's like, those are the times where those conversations really happen, and you can build those relationships that you can use later down the road.
Man, I mean, the relationships at, big conferences and events and where, you go to these types of events and there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And really, you're just looking to build one or two relationships of somebody that you can follow up with. I mean, for the most part, right? Like we're especially in at the stage you're in where you're looking for mentors, and a lot of times clients can turn into mentors along the way where you're able to continue to grow and learn from your interactions with them, right?
Yeah. Or the other way around, some mentors become clients. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, so yeah, we saw a lot of that. It really is just about, getting in through the door, and getting it started. And if you can find a couple good leads when you go to these things, I think it's successful. When I first started going, it was really a shotgun approach. Just talk to everybody. I had somebody recently at one of these conferences. They host them 2 or 3 times a year. They said they remembered seeing me at that first event, and they were just amazed by how many people I would go up and talk to. And it's one of those FOMO things. It's like, well, if I don't talk to everybody, we're going to miss a potential opportunity. And so, it started off as a shotgun blast approach. It's not always like that, because, once you build the connections, 3, 4, 5 different events in, then you don't have to necessarily go up and, like, seek people out. Sometimes they'll seek you out, and sometimes the business conversation doesn't even happen at the event. You just kind of hang out at the event, and then you're like, hey, let's schedule a meeting to get on a Zoom next week. And then that's when the important conversations happen. But you really just gotta get through the door, and you gotta start having those experiences.
One foot in front of the other. So you go to the MAPS conference without a plane, sensor, maybe not even an LLC at that point. When you came back, what was next? Like, is this what was that?
Well, scrambling to find equipment, or making all that work, dealing with insurance and, all of the technical stuff that we had to take care of to make sure that we were good on our side. And we went from operational guys to all of a sudden we're running a business, and we got to deal with bookkeeping, and we got to deal with marketing eventually, and a website. I got to make myself business cards and a logo and all. It was like it was a scramble. It was a mad dash, to make sure that we would be a legitimate company by the time that we really need to start doing some more.
It is a wild scramble.
It
Like,
is.
we did it. Like, now we gotta get this thing moving. Now it's really time to do it. Okay, and so from there, did you start taking on clients, and, like, how did things start to come together?
Yeah, so we started off really B2B, which helped us out quite a bit because I could go to these conferences and I could meet our clients directly. Our clients would have been some of these counties and some of these, state agencies, or sometimes federal agencies or engineering groups, whatever it might be. And that's a pretty big market pool to go after. And each one is kind of segmented in its own way, have different nuances to their side of the industry. And so we didn't even know any of that stuff. And there was no way that we were going to be able to reach everybody and to tell them, our story, and to help them understand exactly what we were doing. So we tried to cut it off at their, who is servicing those people, and then let's go service them. So, we found a few kind of mainstay clients for those first couple years that we were doing work for their clients, and we were picking up some, a few side projects wherever we could. We did a bunch of federal work in 2022 on an imagery project in both Missouri and Kansas, and really cut our teeth on some of these early projects that we were doing for other groups.
So as you were getting rolling, I mean, did you this is your full-time job at that point?
Yeah, this was my full-time job at this point. We weren't really getting paid. We were trying to make things work until we could get paid. I think, when we first started, we were like, yeah, we'll be making a salary in like six months or something like that. Like, as long as we can make it 6 months. And then, I think, a couple years in, we still hadn't paid ourselves any money, and things were a little, stretched. And so, I did some side contracting roles for some different companies that gave me a lot of flexibility. I work from home, and so I still work for some of those companies, in a contracting consulting type role. And so it's allowed us to take the profits from our business and put it back into the business, as opposed to taking them out and kind of living off of them. So it's been a really good opportunity for me.
So when you set out, started your own company, all of a sudden you have clients, you have a plane and sensors and a partner. Is it going the way you pictured it at this point? Where you're like, okay, we start our own company. We're really like, there's always that moment, right? Like, we're really doing it.
Yeah.
And then the work hits, and then it's like you said, a mad scramble. How are you getting clear on where to invest in your business versus, like, how you wanted to use the money as a tool to continue to grow your business? Like, how did you lay that out?
Yeah, well, we knew that we wanted to expand on the aircraft side of things, and we very quickly realized that it probably doesn't make sense for us to ever own sensors and to build a big mapping firm, or, obviously we're not starting an engineering firm anytime soon. And so we wanted to stick with what we were good at. That was the aviation side of things. We knew that we'd be reinvesting back into the aviation side of things. We were
Which means investing into what?
Well, mostly airplanes. At the time, we were leasing airplanes, and it was killing our profit margin. Some months Whenever you lease an airplane, a lot of times you have a minimum requirement of the amount of time that you're putting on that airplane every month. So for us, originally, I think it was 30 hours of flight, and so we were required to lease the plane for 30 hours a month. There's some months where we didn't fly at all, and so that's, I think it was $7,500. Was that right? Yeah, $7,500, like right down the drain. And so we'd be making profits off some of these projects that we would lose the next month because we didn't want to not have an airplane to service our customers, but we also had to pay for it so that it would be there. It's, kind of a chicken before the egg type thing.
Yeah.
And then so when we first started, we had a partner, we were using their sensor, we were doing a little bit of federal work on this imagery project in Missouri and Kansas, and then we got hit with the realities of AR, and the operational parts of the flying, the data acquisition was never an issue.
Yep.
It was what happens after that. What happens when you send an invoice to somebody and then 60 days later you still haven't received payment on it. We talked about how expensive operating an airplane is, and we were paying $7,500 a month minimum on these planes, and we were waiting sometimes, 2, 3, 4 at the most, even up to 7 or 8 months for somebody to pay us. And sometimes these numbers were pretty large, and we had to kind of front them up to that point. So one of
Yes.
our biggest challenges, initially was cash flow and accounts receivable, and then how to work with these companies. Unfortunately, my industry, the backbone of our payment terms is paid when paid, which is, for a small company like mine, it's detrimental. For a larger company like in our industry, NV5, which is a publicly traded company at, I think $2 billion a year revenue, doesn't matter as much for them. But if per se they were using us to fly some of their missions, and they were behind on payments, we're essentially bankrolling them. We're their credit card for some of these projects, and
Yeah.
we weren't charging interest on any of our accounts receivable, and so that we really got smacked in the face with that. That was our first big challenge as a company.
So how did you learn how to navigate that and keep rolling?
You had to pick which clients are willing to work on tighter schedules, payment schedules. The federal work that we were doing at the time had a like a notoriously bad margin on its work. It's kind of known as busy work in our industry. And then the payment terms were terrible for it because they would wait on project completion. So I think it was in Kansas, or no, in Missouri, they needed project completion, which might have taken 3 or 4 months, and then that data has to be processed and put together into a deliverable package so that they can send it to the client. And then that client has to quality control it and make sure that it's everything that they wanted. And sometimes there's some things that they need touched up or edited or redone, and then that gets sent back to us. And so, like I said, by the time they would get paid, it's like 8 months down the road. And that was the last time we ever worked on that federal project. And we've had opportunities to work on it since, but I think we broke even that first year that we did it. And we're talking about, 3, 4 months of work, where we were busy. We kept the plane going and we weren't losing money, but we also weren't really making any money at the time either. Eventually you just get to that point where you have enough options where you can start to pick and choose a little bit about who you work for and what conditions you work under.
Well, it's a beautiful thing when you get to that point, right? Because in the beginning, you're trying to, like back to the mad scramble, you're trying to figure everything out. And so when somebody's like, "Hey, we would like to work with you on this opportunity," it's like, okay.
Yeah.
And then you realize, where it can cripple you in certain scenarios. Then you get clear on who's our ideal client. What are our terms? What is it that we find suitable, and what direction do we want to take our company? And as you get clearer and clearer on that, things get so much more beautiful. But in the beginning, man, it's a little overwhelming, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We still don't really turn down work. We're 5 years in, almost 5 years in by now. And for the most part, we like to see ourselves as the solutions people in our industry. Like if you have a complex issue that you're dealing with on the aviation side of things, or if you need more capacity, or if you have a gap in coverage in certain areas, like we want to figure out a creative solution to go take care of it. a lot of these companies, they don't come from the aviation side of things. They come from the mapping and the data side of things. And then they'll hire people to build their aviation companies. And so, we decided to come in as aviation experts to, to kind of help guide them through that. And so, um, I say we don't really turn down work. I mean, like, we don't really turn down certain types of work. We're always willing to look at a project, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense for us. Hey, it's going to be too expensive for us to work on this for you. Maybe somebody else can do it. We might even, be able to make a referral. Hey, we don't really have the capacity to do something like this, but if it's something that we think we can do, we'll give it a shot, and we'll at least send you a quote and see where we can go.
So, with what your experience has been, like how have you grown since we're talking about those flying lessons to now? I mean, it's been a master class on just exponential growth from pushing yourself to go to a conference and then like figure it out. Like I'm hearing a lot of figure it out scenarios, and creative solutions means we're not just going to drop a cookie cutter scenario on you. We're going to figure it out and get it right based on what our goal is. Like how have you grown the most since starting Helios?
Make a lot of mistakes. You learn from them. It's really tough, but you try to learn from other people's mistakes. So you try to talk to people about that, and it's good to be a little vulnerable with people, and kind of have that back and forth so that you can learn about their mistakes. Like, somebody has to be willing to tell you their mistakes early, and so I learned a lot from that. It was really like I had no other choice. In 2021, we had some family losses, and there was a lot more responsibility that was kind of put on me. And, I didn't have another choice but to figure it out. And so, since then, there's been a lot of development in how to work in the industry and how to work with different types of people, how to be a boss, which was, like, and I don't want to be like, I'm a boss, like how to be somebody's boss,
Yes.
and how to work with employees of different backgrounds and different experiences. And so it's learning a little bit every day about something a little bit different than the day before, almost. And
Yeah.
you're kind of rotating back and forth to make sure that you're staying as equally balanced on each side as you can. Again, we came from the aviation side of things, so the data side of things was really tough for me to kind of pick up. Yeah, there was a lot of things that helped me get to this point. I think uh, one of the most vital things that I've really tried to focus on over this past year, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on your podcast, but we during the action coach meetings, we talked a lot about, especially in marketing. So this year, I'm really on this marketing journey and trying to figure out exactly how our company fits into the rest of the industry and what some of the opportunities are there. And it's not really something we've done up until this point, outside of face to face, back and forth interaction. And I built this network through some of these different industry groups and all these events that I was going to. And so I was like, now would be a good time for us to really elevate it. We rolled out a new service this year, and so, like, let's put some marketing behind it. And I remember a conversation that me and you had multiple times, talking about, how do you assert yourself as, like, an authority within your industry. I'm 29 years old. When I first went to my first event, I was 24 years old, and I didn't know anything, looking back at it. And that was probably visible to some other people too, but you just kind of show that the energy, and people kind of bring you in. And now that I've been doing it for 5 years, I've gotten engaged with these associations. Like, I just feel a lot more equipped to handle some of the authority of the industry. I'm by no means the best person, but because I got engaged with this association, and because I started attending events and building this network, I got put into a role as hosting a panel on our industry, aerial acquisition, at the MAPS conference. And so it's one of the biggest conferences for our industry, if not the biggest. And they put me in charge of talking about my profession, doing aerial survey. Again, I am not nearly the best aerial survey operator, in the industry. but I can get up there and I know some of the best, and I can get up there and I can have a conversation with them on stage and talk about here's the challenges and here's what's changing, and we can project a little bit. And so I became a little bit of an authority amongst that group, and then I really tried to take that to LinkedIn to focus on marketing this year. And
Yep.
so, and we had talked about this a lot. We talked about podcasting and blogging about our experiences and making videos and just producing as much content as possible, because when people,
Like we're doing right now.
yeah, when people see you all the time, you become like an authority, because you're talking about this stuff, and it's good information and it's up to date. Over the past 4 or 5 months, we rolled out this new program, and we've been very, very technical with here's why we think that this is going to be good, and here's how it applies to the industry, and here's how it takes some of the challenges that we've dealt with away from our operations, so we can simplify things. And we really just we just put it out there on LinkedIn. Here's what is going to be the future of our industry. And people just started listening, and people started reaching out and saying, hey, we kind of think that things are going in that general
Yeah.
direction as well. Do you guys think you could kind of help us out, in one way or the other? And it's like, yeah, like let's do it. And that would have never have happened if I didn't put myself out there as, and I don't want to say I truly am an authority. I just like somebody who talks about what we do
Yeah.
and tries to be groundbreaking with it.
Well, it's about creating a platform. And so being visible, but then, also being able to bring people with you on the journey is really where the juice starts to happen. And you're doing all those things. I mean, like in getting so involved in the groups and developing a better understanding. And what's cool, I mean, even like for me with this podcast, right? Like I get to sit and talk to high level people that have owned companies or are in high level leadership, and it's just like sitting front row to masterclass asking questions. I mean, it's cool stuff, man. I mean, it's a lot of fun. So congrats for all the good work.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Nick. It's
Yeah.
been a journey, but it's been a good one.
Well, and the other thing is we're still in the early phases of it. So what does the future look like for Helios Airborne Solutions and my man Quinton Lewis?
For the company, I think we're doing some really cool things. I was talking about what we released earlier this year, where we released a service to support some new technologies that are coming online. We think that eventually we'll have the opportunity to scale this. We're already scaled nationwide to a degree. We'd like to scale this eventually internationally. Really focus more on frequency of sale over the margin on sale. And so we have some really cool opportunities in that regard. We have a goal to put together one of the largest commercial aviation fleets in history. Not that we would own, but we're working on some stuff there, some really cool stuff, and we think it's possible. On my side of things, like I really just enjoy, you know, doing little bits and pieces of and like learning about maybe not new industries, but new ways that I can use the experience that I have to either help my industry or apply it to an adjacent industry. I really like doing work up on Capitol Hill and with some of the advocacy stuff, and I think there's a future there as well. So there's lots of opportunities out there. I don't really have a set a goal about where I want to be in 10 or 15 years. Hopefully retired, I guess. Just figuring out whatever I have to do up to that point to get to a point where Helios is sellable, and maybe some of the other things that we're doing become sellable, so that we can live a lot easier than we lived for our first couple of years as business owners.
This is good stuff. So Quentin, to wrap up, what is advice you would give somebody to either starting a company or owning it and wanting to grow to the next level? What type of advice would you offer them?
Starting the company, and I've thought about this before. I would tell everybody this. I would tell kids this. Get it on paper, get it filed, get your paperwork filed right away. You need an LLC as soon as possible. Even if you don't really know what you want to do, if you just know you want to be a business owner, start an LLC. It can be generic. You can figure it out later. One of our biggest challenges is still one of our biggest challenges is funding. Our industry typically uses some older airplanes that not aren't always in the best shape, and a lot of these lenders don't really want to operate within our industry. And so we've had a big struggle finding funding for what we want to do and expansion. My business partner is not a U.S. citizen, so the SBA passed a mandate this year that U.S. citizen or that non-U.S. citizens are no longer allowed for SBA loans. So we're still dealing with some of these challenges. One of the things that you can do to help mitigate that is to get an LLC filed and to get a bank account and to just start running money through that bank account. If you're going to mow somebody's yard, put it into that bank account, pay taxes on it, do your due diligence, make sure you're good on that side. But you have to have a cash flow. You have to have a paper trail so that when you do take your company to these banks or to these private lenders, whoever it might be, you say, here's 3 years of financials. What can you do for me? But if you don't have those 3 years of financials, they're not even going to look at you. So if you want funding, you either have to go and buy an existing business, or you need to get your business to a point where it's competitive and where these banks are, feel secure in their investment. And the only way to do that is to get started and to get money running through it. So that's why I would say on that side, if you have a company, I would say just put yourself out there more. You can either be the face of your company, or you have to hire the face of your company. It's a lot more expensive to hire the face of your company and to maybe have like an influencer do your marketing and stuff. And if you can get to the point to where you can take over, some of that, it's a lot cheaper and I think more satisfying, at least on my end of things.
Awesome. Well, Quinton, thank you for joining the podcast. It's been awesome having you on the business growth journey, man.
Thanks, Nick. Love what you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Quinton.
See you guys.